Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 prakim Rambam, Hilchos Isurei Bia, prakim Gimel, Daled, and Hey. Peta Gimel is speaking about the punishment for having a Bia with an Ashes Ish, and the Rambam is going to go into all of the different types of the unique scenarios, even though we learned in the beginning of this series that the general punishment for Ashes Ish is Chenek, but we're going to learn the punishment for having a relation, God forbid, with a wife of a minor, with the daughter of a kohen, with a nara hamurasa, and the unique din of a shivcha charufa. According to the Rambam, we will see that this will be the only area in the Torah that a katan could be chayiv to bring a korban. Chaver Peri Gimel has 17 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. It says the Rambam haba al eishes katan. Afilu hoisi yavama, right, who was married to the first husband because the father married her off. Shaba aleha ben teisha shana b'yom echad, and the Yavam, as we learned, did yibum by having an act of bia. And even though we learned that bia, right, has the same koyach of minor, but that's the case where you can have a wife of a minor. So the din is harei zeh pater. Why is it pater? Because the Torah says regarding, God forbid, committing adultery with a married woman, Asher yinaf Ashes ish. That's the words in the pasuk. Chazal learn Ashes ish parat to a wife of a minor. Here we're speaking about marriages that, to begin with, are not biblical marriages, as we learned, or an Ashes tumtum bandregenes, or she is the one that's chedeshes v'hashoita, who is the wife of a pikeya. In other words, the marriage is only valid on a rabbinic level. Or if a person has a relation with a married woman who's only married, besafek, could be midoiraisa, could be nothing, bal ishashim kadeshes besafek, or migoideshes besafek. In all of these scenarios, paskins the Rambam, that kulam peturim. Okay, in other words, to be chayiv chenek, it has to be kedushay Torah. The husband has to be an adult, and it has to be a vadai marriage. Now, nevertheless, just because you're pater, you're not going to get chenek. Then makin oison, makas, mardos. All right. And the chiddush here is even Eishes Chareshes, for example. Well, I'll go more, Eishes Shoita. Eishes Shoita is b'chlal not a marriage. Nevertheless, just like a panuya and a panuya, even though on the biblical level they're not going to be punished, but the Chalchamim have the koyach, have the right, and they give makas mardos for this type of behavior. Halacha base. Now in reverse, not that the husband, the beginning of halacha aleph, the ikir is Eishes Katan. What happens if she's the ketana and the Eishes Hagadol, which is even more common? In other words, for the greatest example where you have a biblical marriage is that the father married her off. It's in halacha aleph. Again, the Rambam explained, how can it be an Eishes Katan? Because the brother married a woman and he passed away, and this minor had a bia with her. Here we're speaking about a biblical marriage. So im kichavia, and that's why she's married, even though she's a minor. There's no oinshin for minors, but the man will get chenek, and v'hiptura miklum. She's not a basanshin. Furthermore, even though she's not a basanshin, the halacha that she's asura labal will be over here. The nesra al baylo kamay should be arno behilchas soita. And guys, this is the Rambam l'shitasa. Just to make a correction again, the Rambam does not subscribe to the rule of pitui ketana oinus. If you were to say that even when you seduce a minor, so to say, she does it willingly, it has a halachic din of an oinus, then she would not be prohibited on her husband, unless the husband is a kohen. But the Rambam doesn't subscribe to that. The Rambam holds that even a minor, if she acquiesces, it's considered an act that she did willingly. She's not going to be punished because she's not a bas anshin. But since she committed adultery willingly, then she's going to be asur al bayl. Ve'emi bas miyun, which means the marriage, like we said, is really not a marriage because the father didn't marry her, or if it was just the mother or the brothers, then makin oisoi makas mardos. And here's the chiddush, and she remains muteres labaylo, even if he was a kohen, which is unbelievable. Why? Because, like we mentioned, because since she's able to retroactively under the marriage, we don't view her as an Eishes Ish. And by the way, a Kohen cannot be married to a halachic zoina, a Panuya that has a relation with a Panui, as long as they are allowed to get married. In our case, she's a minor, allowed to get married when she becomes an adult. That doesn't render her into a zoina, as we'll learn later how halachically does one assume that status. And therefore, since she's not a zoina, she can remain married to the husband who's a kohen. Wow, halachigim. Bas kohen, a unique then. Shezinsa, when she's an Eishes Ish. And again, we learned the general rule is that the Eishes Ish is bechenek. But she's the daughter of a kohen. So bein shahaya baila kohen, independent of the linealogy of the yichus of the husband, genealogy, whether he's a kohen, whether he's a Yisrael. Furthermore, even if her husband is a mamzer, right, which means that they should not have gotten married or in a sin. But since the Kiddushin was Teifes, so she's an Eishes Ish. Since she's a fact, she's a Bas Kohen, Harei Zu B'Sreifa. And that's a pasuk in Emor where it says, Bas Ish Kohen Kisechel is nice. Right? So it says, and the Torah writes, however, the man who committed adultery with her will get chenek. But this unique din of Sreifa only goes for her.
Rabbi.
Yes.
Did the Bas Kohen mean that the father has to be a kosher Kohen?
Yes. Not a halal. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. V'chein Bas Yisrael. Eishes Kohen is also bechenek. That's the irony. In other words, when a Bas Kohen, when a Bas Yisrael marries a Kohen, for example, she can eat Truma. She's not a Bas Kohen. Commits adultery like any Eishes Ish. This is unique about who the father is. Halacha Dal. Another, we're giving all the exceptional cases where a man has a relation, an adulterous relation with a married woman, and the din won't be bechen. Next case will be a Nara Hamuras, and Nara Dafka, and Mo'irasa Dafka. Says the Rambam. Both of them here, by the Bas Kohen, only she gets burned. He bechenek. If a guy commits adultery with a Nara Hamurasa, I mean, she's not boigeres. Normally it's from 12 years until 12 and a half, or whenever else the Narus begins during that window, and she's not married, but she's engaged. Shnei beskila. The Eina Chayav Meskila Shatia Nara. I'm sorry, she has to be a psula. She has to be Mo'irasa, and she has to still be living bebeis aviyah. All of these details have to be met for them to both get skila. If she's a begeres, or if she already went into the chuppah, even though the couple, the legal couple, did not yet have an act of biyah. Furthermore, afila masara ha'av, l'shluchi ha'baal, which means she didn't even go into the chuppah yet, but she left her father's domain, and then, God forbid, was in Savaderech, then she's like any other married woman, and areizu bechenek. Halacha hey. Oh. Now, in other words, here the father married her off. We're speaking about the Kiddushin. It's a biblical Kiddushin. So the din is, listen to this. Don't think that since she's a Ketana, right, like we had in Halacha Beis, okay, she's not going to get punished, but he's going to get chenek. No, since she's a Ketana that will become a Nara, he gets skila. Wow. The because it's halacha beis is nasuya. Here we're speaking about a only ma'irasa. She's exempt because she's not a basansha. The nara ma'irasa, who is a bas koyin, shezinsa. So what do? She gets skila. Unbelievable. And not since he's a bas koyin, she gets Sreifa. The din of Nara Hamorasa trumps the din of a Bas Kohen. Now, God forbid, 10 men had relations with her, but she is still a psula of a base of biyam. So the first one that gets skila because she's the psula. The other 9, even though she's a Nara and she's a Moirasa and she's a base of biyam, but she's no longer a psula. So the other 9 will get chenek. Which means halachically for this we still consider her a psula. So then all of the 10 will get skila. Halacha 7. Not a meirasa shohoisa mishuchreres oigiyoides afalpisha nishtachara oinesgaida prior to her being 3 years and 1 day. So therefore we say halachically she has a din of a be'ula if she gets, even though she got, because even though you can argue that even if someone had a relation with her, the psulim are going to grow back. Doesn't work that way. Just like, for example, a kohen cannot marry a zoina, as we'll explain later, and that refers even to someone who became a geyotis when the day she was born. Even though the act of a bia, God forbid, is not even considered an act of a bia. Doesn't change over here. Then harei zu b'chenek chol eshes ish. Why? Just to know the reason, because the pasuk says, but regarding the nara moirasa psula ki asa sanavala bi Yisrael. So Chazal learned bi Yisrael comes to exclude converts. Halacha 8. Din chadash yeich b'moitzi shemra. And we learned about this 2 days ago. But regarding our halachas, regarding the skila, there's something unusual. Ma'achidish, because as we just learned, his accusation isn't just she was not a psula, but he brought Adam, and the Adam testified that she was mizana. Nara mo'irasa. Now normally nara mo'irasa only gets skila if it was bebeis aviyah. But here, even if she was mizana after she entered the chuppah, nevertheless, from moitzi shemra, soiklin oisal pesach beis aviyah. So not only do you have the chiddush that she gets skila, even though the normal din of nara moirasa is only bebeis aviyah, but we're going to see another detail of where she gets skila, as the Rambam was going to specify. Aval sha'ar na'arois moirasois. Like we said, if they did znus, but it was after they left their father's home, even prior to the chuppah, so really says that there is a total of really 3 types of deaths. Generally, you say eshes ish, that's mazana b'chenek, but you have the chenek, you have eshes ish sreifa, the baskoyin, and you have the eshes ish, which is beskila, which is not a moirasa. And then there's going to be nuances regarding Moitzi Shemra, also with skill. So it depends. Only after she entered the Beis Chamiyah, there Niskelas al Pesach Beis Aviyah. That's also to reprimand the home. Since of a Beis Chamiyah, but before Koidim Sheyimsar Oisa Ha'av, Afa Pisha Ha'idu. In other words, since the Beis Aviyah means because the woman was not, why is she doing it in her father-in-law's house? She went to visit her chassan, but she wasn't given over for marriage yet. So the din is there, she gets skila, not a moidasa, but Pesach shar ha'irahi. Halacha yud, bo'u ha'edim achar shebagra, v'yachar sheba'ala bailam. That she was mizana bebeis aviyah when she was a nara. So here we have the 3rd type of skila. This skelas bebeis skila. So there's nuances. Either she'll get skila bebeis aviyah, or she's going to get skila pesach shar ha'ir. Obviously, it has to be a Jewish city, or she'll get skila the way normally skila is given. There was a special place called the beis skila. Now, halacha yudal. Even though her mother converted prior to her coming into the world, here the din will be that we're not going to exclude her from ki asa son of Allah bi Yisrael. Asa son of Allah bi Yisrael, she's going to get skila, but she'll always get it al pesach sharoir. What happens if the city doesn't allow it? Not every city is a Jewish city. What happens if she doesn't have a father, but the father doesn't own a home? In other words, Pesach Beis Aviyah is not ma'akev, it's only ideal, and when it's not shayich, then you go to the default, and the default is that skila is given in an area known as the Beis HaSkila, as we'll learn later towards the end of Mishnah Torah and Hilchos Sanhedrin in the Rambam. Chevron nu halacha yud beis. Halba erva min arois bias harbe. Person has many relations with an erva. Chayiv karas emisas bezdin al kol biyo biyo. We don't say you already violated and now you're not going to be chayiv again. And guys, it's huge because what did we learn in the beginning in Perek Aleph? This is a general rule. Any sin for which you chayiv b'mezid kadis, you do it b'shoigig, you chayiv chatos. So if the guy had many relations with her, he'll be chayiv many chatois. Afa pisha ein based in yochel muhammas ela misa achas. But you should know harei abiyah is nechshavis like haveris harb. Chein imba biyah achas. That one act, not many acts with the same woman. One act shechayovin olam mishay mois harbe many lavin. Like we just spoke out in the intro yesterday, right? A person cannot marry his mother. A person is not allowed to have a relation with mother, relation with father's wife. Many people, their father's wife is their mother. And a chanami, that's going to be two. You can have scenarios, we're going to see later scenarios, one act of bias in violation of many lavin. Ima yeshoige, then we're speaking about the edivus for which you chai about these kares. So then maybe carbon, I'll call shame the shame, even though the person only did one act. As we're going to learn in Hilchos Kagois. So here we're going to get killed. You only get killed once. Nevertheless, and as we learn in Perek Yud Zayin, it's whenever there isn't a chi of Kodesh, right? Let's say even a chi of Kodesh, I'm sorry, chi of Kodesh b'mezid, you chayiv malchus. There'll be chayiv many malchus. Or any chayav elavin. So the point is that you don't say that for one act you chayiv once. When it comes to a penalty in court, then we say, right, ein loikin u'mishalmin, kam lebe derabamine. If you did an ayitud misas bezdin, you're going to get the more chamer of the misas bezdin. Nice. That's when it comes to death. But when it comes to malchus, many malchus. Halacha yugim. Chavah, this is going to be the final topic of this Perek, or almost the final topic about the Shivcha Charufa, and that's a parsha that we have in the Torah. Big machlokes to show them how to understand what the Torah is talking about. But let's go read the Rambam. Halacha Yud Gimel. Shivcha Charufa ha'amura b'Torah. The Torah speaks about a Shivcha Charufa. We are referring to a woman born as non-Jewish. She was a slave woman. Let's say she sold herself into slavery, but she was owned by two people. One of them gave her a document of emancipation. And as we learned, when a person, an Eved or a Shivcha, becomes enslaved to a Jew, ideally they have to go to the mikvah, l'shem abdus. And they already have a semi-status of a Jew. And if they become freed, then they are full-fledged Yidden. Here, Chetzia Shivcha, Chetzia Bas Chayden. So she's half Jewish. Now, listen to what happened. An Eved Ivri is the only Jew that can marry a Yiddish woman, right? That's why it speaks about an Eved Ivri, that the Gapa Yavi. But it could be, you can have a person that is married. And God forbid, he was sold by Beis Din into slavery, Eved Ivri. But while he's sold into slavery, as long as he is already married, the master has the right to get him married to a Shivcha Kananis. So it's interesting. He gave Kedushin to this woman because he's saying, listen, I can marry a Jewish woman. She's half free. An Eved Ivri can marry a Shivcha Kananis. She's half Shivcha Kananis. But is that marriage considered a real marriage? What are we looking for? A married woman who commits adultery gets chenek. He and she. Is she called married? That's the question. So it's not considered halachically a full-fledged marriage. So here the din is that shenemer, as it says, lo yumsu ki chupasa. In other words, that if she committed adultery, she won't get the normal penalty of death, chenek, normally chenek. You know why? Because she wasn't fully free, which implies if she'll become the shtachra rakula, then she's a full-fledged Yiddish woman. Chayav and oleh misas bezdin shahadei te'asa eshes ish gemura. We're saying in a detail that if he gave her kedushin when she was half and half, and later she gets fully freed, the half kedushin is chal on all of her. But she wasn't freed yet, and we're going to learn that in El Chasishus. We learned that in El Chasishus. We really learned that suffix about it. We spoke it out. So now, what is the punishment? So it says that Rambam bias shivchazu mishuna mikol bias asuras batoy. What's the unique? First of all, they are considered somewhat married. So if we're speaking about committing adultery with intent, she gets malchus. So that's a case where you can say a married woman who only gets malchus. How do we know you get malchus? Because when the Torah says bikoyedes tia, The word bikoides means a carbon. I'm sorry, bikoides means investigator to give her malchus. But when the Torah says bikoides tihia, which is in the female, she gets malchus. To tell you that he gets another punishment. Now, his punishment is written explicitly in the Chumash. Why does he chayiv to bring an asham? It's called an asham shivcha charufa, as it says vehevi es ashamay. Now, look, you can say carbon and malchus. No, from the word ti, we learn only she gets malchus. So she gets malchus and he brings a carbon. Now, says the Rambam, when it comes to this carbon, echad shoygig ve'echad mezid b'shivcha charufa. Shoygig means he doesn't know the halacha. Shoygig means he didn't know it's her. He's going to be chayiv to bring an asham. For her to get malchus, b'shoygig you don't get malchus. So they don't have to, but for him, no matter what, he's going to have to bring the carbon. And many actions, nevertheless, they'll only be required to bring one asham. Okay. If they had many acts of bias, chayav malchus are called biyobiyah. If she was mezida, like any other chayav lavin, just because you did it once, a person ate treif and they get malchus, they're not going to be. They're not covered. For every time they eat, they're going to be chayav again. Halacha tezvav. Now, other details. Hama'ara b'shivcha charufa, as we defined that earlier on. Right, this be a gemura, and then this is just the beginning of the act of cohabitation, as defined in the Rambam. But v'lei gamar biyasei. Here the din is pater. Achi igmar biyasei. Unlike the normal dinim that you say that hama'ara is chayiv, the eino chayiv ella al hagadoyla. So here we are saying, unlike we began in today's chapter, that it's shayich for a man, right? For example, haba al kitana eishes gadol. What did we say? If she was married off by her father, the guy gets chenek even though she's exempt. They don't have to both be chayiv. Here we say that if she's not yet a gedoyla, which means that what? Which means she's not going to get malchus. If she doesn't get malchus, then the man won't have to bring a carbon. So another din is habu'ula. Another din is hamezida. Another din is uberetzaina. All of these preconditions are needed for her to get malchus. Or she wasn't yet a bu'ula, or she didn't act b'shoygig. For shoygig, you don't get malchus. Or God forbid, he raped her, or she was not active because she was sleeping. He will be exempt. Because since she's exempt, he's exempt. Also, another exception. Normally, by all of the bias asuras, as we learned yesterday, right? Mishkevei isha. What difference does it make? Here it makes a difference. But shebeshivcha charufa unique. Because by shivcha charufa, the Torah speaks about shivcha zera, which implies only an act of cohabitation that theoretically can make her pregnant. Again, as it says, mishkevei plural, from where we learn magid akosov, that no matter whether it's kedarka or not, it's equally considered an act of adultery.
Rabbi,
yes.
Is that why if she's a basula, it doesn't account in this case because you can't get pregnant the first time? Is that why?
No. Because again, there's a pasuk that speaks that she's a bu'ula. I think, Danny, because in order for the marriage, for her to be even semi-married, she needed to act an act of bia with the Evet Ivri, if I'm not mistaken.
Because there is something in the Gemara about a basula the first time that she doesn't get pregnant from that.
But then we have exceptions. We have exceptions for that. But it's not because correct. We have the Schimchitas, the daughters of Loit. Means who pater min hakarben, she's patur min hamalkus. But still, if they were shnei mezidim ugedoylim, like we mentioned in the beginning of the Spedic, even a panui and a panuya, you can get makas mardus for it. Halacha Yud Zayin, the final halacha, and here the Rambam has a chidush nifla, and many argue with the Rambam. Says the Rambam ben teisha shanu b'yemechad shaba al shivcha charufa. So it's considered an act of bia. She's an adult. The Rambam wrote that clearly. She has to be gedoyla. He loika, and now just like we said in halacha tezvav, that when the woman, right, is not loika, he's not going to bring the carbon. Now let's flip it. If all of her conditions were met, and the act is called halachically an act of bia, why? Because he's 9 years old. Point is, she's going to get malchus. If she's getting malchus, he's chayiv to bring the carbon. How old is he? 9 years old, 10 years old. That's a trivial question. Where do you find in the Torah that a katan is chayiv b'dorais? According to the Rambam over here. Well, who may be carbon? But again, we need to make sure that she's chayiv malchus. She has to be gedoyla, like we just mentioned. She already needed to be a bu'ula. I think for her to be considered at least partially married to the Eved Ivri, the marriage is done through bia, and it has to be from her part ubirat soina, because you never get malchus for doing something b'shoigi, as we just said. Whenever you examine and you discover that she's going to get malchus, that's the bikoides. He has to bring a carbon. Now, what does it mean? He has to bring it when he's a minor, or there's a chiyuv. Maybe there's a chiyuv, but he only has to bring it as an adult. I'm sure this is discussed over here, but that's a huge chiddush to which the others argue with the Rambam, and they say it's not possible to have a scenario where you're not a bar unshin, you're not a bar mitzvah, and you're going to be chayiv in anything, but as they paskin the Rambam. Okay, moving on to Pedig Dalet. Pedig Dalet is going to be speaking about a nida and a biblical ziva, even though nowadays, because of the B'nai Yisrael, Hechmiru Alatzman, after various steps, we don't differentiate at all. Now the halacha is any time a woman sees blood, as long as we halachically determine for that blood to be coming from the makar, from the womb, even if it's tipas dam kechardo, even if there was no hergish, even if it's not a period, it came from a womb. Not only is she tameya, but always on the same level of she has to count shivas nakiyim, and the Rambam doesn't even mention the other din that once you have to count shivas nakiyim, if male zera that was in a woman's body left her body, which is completely not, it's involuntary, it doesn't allow that day to count as one of the shivas nakiyim. It doesn't make her have to start all again, which is what would happen if she sees blood during the shivas nakiyim, then final nachamol the 7 days. But zera is soisid that day. So that's the Rambam is not going to speak about this over here, but that's just explaining why we first wait to 5 days, even prior to beginning the 7 days. Right. But forget about that. Just to know that biblically, 7 days is only needed if a woman becomes a zava gedolah. If a woman only becomes a halachic nida, even though we use the word always, a halachic nida doesn't need any nikiyim. If a woman sees dam, and that dam is halachically nida midoy raisa, you don't pass in that way, then that day is day number 1. As long as she can make a hefsekara at the end of the 7th day, even if she bled all of the 7 days, she goes to the mikvah that night. So just I'm saying, and then for the subsequent 11 days, if she sees blood on 3 consecutive days of the next 11 days, then she becomes a Zava Gedolah, and then she has to count Shivas Nakiyim. But we're going to learn a little bit about Nida, about Aziva, and about the Isur Labaila. That's one din, which we practice today. And the other din, that she's Tameh. Generally, din a Tuma and Tara, what we have to learn, the Mashiach is about to come, but we don't practice these dinim. No way the way they practice it then. But let's learn. Pedig Dalet has 22 halachas, and some of what we're going to be learning over here, as well as in next chapter, hey, is halacha lamaisa, because the isur labayla part of nida is something that we live today, but we have certain chumras beyond that which the Rambam is going to write. Halacha hanida. Okay, nida means, like we mentioned, let's go. Biblical nida doesn't mean a drop of blood. It means vaginal bleeding or period. Right, the vessels that a woman has, the cycle of blood that leaves the womb when she did not become pregnant. Hanida, says the Rambam, Harei hi kishar kol ha'aroyas, and therefore hama'araba, anyone who has, like we mentioned also, a act of cohabitation generally is not only if it's called a gemarbia, even if the person only had a ma'ara, right? If a person inserted just the corona in the woman's body. That's it. It's called the beginning. Ben kedarka, ben shaloi kedarka. Again, vaginal, anal, it's all the same. Chayiv kares. Okay. As we learned, unlike the unique din that we learned in the previous chapter, that they only have to be punished if they're both going to be, if they're both bar or bas anshin. No. Even if she's 3 years, she's a minor. Side of the terrible thing that he did to her. We're not just talking about it. It's called a bia. Now, Shabbos. Now you can argue 1 second. Why is she a nida? Maybe she should only become a nida when she's an adult. It doesn't work that way. Theoretically, if a girl on the day of her birth has vaginal bleeding, she becomes a nida. Shabbos mitama benida vafilu b'yem lidasava. And like we just mentioned, that biblically, there's something called the zava. This Yemei Zivus only begin after the 7 days of Nida went by. The days of Nidas begin when she sees Dam. So if you're going to say that a woman that was born and she has Dam, she becomes a Nida, when is the first time that she can become a Zava Gedoyla? You have to have 7 days of Nida plus bleeding 3 days in the subsequent days. So Ba'ubas Asara Yamim theoretically can become Tameh with the dinim of Ziva. And biblically, hugely different, you take away the Tuma of Nida simply by going to the mikvah after the Yemei Nidus. And you can only go to the mikvah if you become a Zava Gedoyla after first counting Shivas Nakim. The Dovers of Pnei Shmuel, that what? She'ein hefresh ben Gedoyla liktana lutumas nidois v'zivois. Halacha beis ve'echad abo ala nidom called Shivas Hayomim. We're not speaking about the Nikiyim. We're speaking about a woman who had a drop of blood on the first day. She began the period, and it was a 1 day period. For the next 7 days, those are the days of Nida. Or let's learn another din Torah that we don't practice today, which is that when a woman gives birth, she becomes Tameh. If she gave birth to a Zachar, to a male, to a son, she's Tameh for the next 7 days. If she gives birth to a daughter, she's Tameh for the next 14 days. The Rambam is of the opinion, even when there's Mayon Echad, which means she didn't even stop bleeding from birth. Bleeding. At the end of 7 days, she goes to the mikvah. And for the next 33 days, even if the blood did not stop, though that blood biblically is called Dam Toyar, she's not Tameh. After a girl, 14 days Tameh, even if the blood didn't stop for a moment, she goes to the mikvah. And even if she keeps on bleeding for the next 66 days, that dam is dam toya. But if you had a relation with the first week after a boy, that's the beginning of Parshas Tazria. Or let's go, if a woman becomes a Zava Gedoyla, that's what he means. So if a man has a relation either while blood is flowing from her, or even while she's counting the Shivas Nikiyim, just because there's no blood flowing from her, it doesn't make her 1 ounce less Asur Labayla, or Asur to any man. She has the din of a Zava. And Bein Shivcha Bein Mishuchreres, Hakoil Bikodes, highest level of Erva. Shenemer, as it says in Mitzvah concerning a Nida, Shivas Yomim Tiyeh Benidas. And by Yazov, it also says over there in Mitzvah, Kol Yemei Zoiv Tomasa Kimei Nidas Atiyah, the same level. And by Yeledus, it says, Kimei Nidas Devoisa Titma, all right? Or Vitama Shavuayim Kinidasa, all has the same level of Tuma. Same level of Tuma, the same level, same prohibition of, we say she's prohibited to her husband because she's married. But the Rambam says it's not about husband. Anida, whether she's married, whether she's not married, the Isur, to be with her is equally husband or anyone else. The only thing is, if she's married and another man has a relation, then he's also violating having a relation with a married woman. But we're focusing just on the Isur of Anida. We're speaking about a woman who gave birth only the first 7 days, only the first 14 days. If she went to the mikvah, and again, we hold, the Rambam holds that on the biblical level, she would go to it's not that the blood has to stop for a few minutes, epis. Because then we say the new blood is coming from another womb. Mayon echad. No, even if it's for one, she didn't stop bleeding. It's the same flow. She goes to the mikvah. Aval nida v'zova v'yoledis. If they didn't go to the mikvah, she didn't go to the mikvah after 7 days. She didn't go to the mikvah after 14 days. Or b'chlal nida. All right, she's already in menopause. She's doesn't make if she didn't go to the because a woman only leaves her status of nida both when you need to count the days, and there's always a count of days. By nida, it's the 7 days of nida. By By Yoleda 7 or 14. There's days and tefillah. It says, and being an avlachol tamei, shubutumasei ache yitpoil. All of this is by a Jewish woman, and not only a Jewish woman, even a shivcha. However, hagoyim ein chayav and aleim mishum nida. They don't have this tumas nida, and not from zavom, and not from yoldas. However, the chachamim gozru al kol hagoyim, both male and female, that they should have a status of a zava or of a zav. Sheyu kizavim tamid bein ra'u bein, independent of them seeing blood or not. Le'inyan tum of atara. Remember that. Halacha hey. Kol dam shetira hayoledes b'toich shloishu shloishim shel zachar. So after the 7 days, there's the subsequent 33 days. Or after the 14 days of giving birth to a daughter, you have the subsequent 66 days. That blood is called dam toyad. We don't pass in this way, guys, but the Rambam is speaking about the Rambam. Elo toiveles achar shiva shel zachar ba'achar aboasa kinekeva. She goes to the mikvah and umishaneshes mitasa here afal pi shadam says. That's the chiddush. We had a machlekes in the Gemara about that. The Rambam says that you don't even, the dam doesn't have to stop for an instant. So we call it mayon echad. Doesn't matter. It's the gzeres hakosuv. After that amount of time, that blood does not render her into a nida. She goes to the mikvah.
Rabbi, is there any sort of biological difference between having a boy versus a girl, or is this just simply gzeres hakosuv, whatever? Yeah,
certain logics they say that since the girl herself has the potential to give life, unlike men, right? Women are the mother of all life, so there's more life force, so there's more tumah. That's the 7 and the 14. Since there's more tumah, there's more tara. It goes together. 7, 33, 14, 66. It matches the numbers. Halacha 6. Kol chayave tfilois. Another big rule on a biblical level. All who have to go to the mikvah by the day. I know today all the women go to the mikvah at night. That's because the women took upon themselves the chumras of both nida and zava. And taka, what's the chumrah of a nida? A nida doesn't need 7 clean days, but a nida has to go to the mikvah at night. And really, the only ones that go to the mikvah at night are a nida. She doesn't go on the 7th day. She has to go after the 7 days, but at night. And all your ledas. See here, what do we do nowadays? We count shivas nekiyim. So you can say if it's shivas nekiyim because you're being machmer, maybe is zava. But they go to the mikvah at night. Sharei oime benida, shivas yomim tia benida. So hashiva kulan benida. And she goes to the mikvah b'leil shmini. She goes to the mikvah after the 7 days, which is and the night going into the 8th, or when a woman gives birth to a girl, then she has to go to the mikvah after the 14 days, but not on the 15th day part of the day, but on the night going into the 15th.
In all these cases where you say she goes by night, Rabbi, if she didn't and delayed it, she could go the next day, right?
Not so simple. We're going to learn about this right now. Even in the Rambam, we hesitate a lot. If she didn't go in the earliest time possible, then still why? You can argue when you have full 7 days, because if a woman, a nida, will go to the mikvah during the day, then since generally mikvah is done during the day, so then she's going to forget that it was because it was the 8th day. Then maybe later she's going to go on the 7th day. You know, a nida may never go on the 7th day. However, or what happens if you can't go at night because of bandits, or because of the cold, or because the mikvah is in a place and you live in a place, you're living in a Jewish ghetto. Jews needed to be locked in their ghettos. You can't go at night. Right? The Rambam doesn't speak about ghettos, but he's speaking about sometimes you can't get into where you live, or you can't go to where the mikvah is. So then, under these circumstances, but never on the 6th day, never on the 7th day. That's what you have to remember. Okay,
so halacha the 8th day in such a case.
That's correct. Halacha 9. Here we go. We're speaking about what we call a fixed vesis, a fixed cycle When a woman knows exactly when to expect her monthly bleeding, then on any other time other than that time, she doesn't have to be chayish. Maybe she is bleeding. So let's go. Kol hanoshim that have the veses. Now, let me just tell you, halachically, you establish a veses, what we call now a veses kavua, by, we don't need for the veses to come at the same hour on the clock, but we're going to divide every 24-hour full day into two periods, two times, called oinas hayoim and oinas halayla. Let's just, as an example, let's use one of the ways of affixing a veses is by through the day of the Jewish calendar month. So if a woman gets her period 3 months in a row, always on Yom Chais Chav Dalid, but during the daytime of Chav Dalid or during the nighttime of Chav Dalid, that's a woman that has a fixed veses. So a woman has a fixed veses until she tells her husband, I'm tummy, which can always happen. Women, because of dinei tuma vatara that we're not practicing today, anida's tummy, which means her garments become tummy. Now, I know you can take them to the mikvah, but it's a bother. So a woman would have certain garments she would only wear when she's anida. Also, then they didn't have the type of protection that women have today, so the garments can become soiled. So also for technical reasons, she would have garments that if it would be bloody, they wouldn't bother. It's dirty garments to begin with. Once she's wearing those garments, becheska, she's anida. Why would she wear it if she wouldn't be anida? Other than that, then we can presume she remains starved. Furthermore, now comes a bigger chiddush. A husband is going on a trip. Guys, there was no communication then. And when he left, she was tohira. The guy comes back then, a year later. She had many periods in between. If when he left, she was betara, she has a fixed veses, he's not coming on the time that she's normally going to have her period. He's coming in the time of the month that she's normally tohira. He doesn't have to ask her. And even if he found her sleeping, now guys, a man is not allowed to have a relation with his wife when she's sleeping. We're not speaking about that. We're speaking about beneged this dinam of tumantara or isol labayla. As long as it's not during the time that she normally gets her period, and you're not chayish that maybe she's an idam. And even though the truth is that now, for Kabbalistic reasons, if a woman is not going to be with her husband on the night of the mikvah, she doesn't go to the mikvah normally. So you can argue, come on, all these months passed, at least let me ask her. No, you don't have to ask her. She doesn't have to say, I went to the mikvah and I'm tohira, because you left her while she was becheskas tohira. But in the reverse, if when he left her, she was an idam, even though you know that the time needed already passed, probably she went to the mikvah. It's not during the time of the month that she's normally an idam. No, a man cannot have a relation with his wife. And by the way, even nowadays, even when a woman, you're living in the same city and you know your wife is going to the mikvah, when she comes back from the mikvah, she has to say explicitly, I went to the mikvah. Because if not for that, how do you remove the halachic status of Tuma? Halacha 10. She tells her husband, I'm tummy. And then a short while later, she says, why did I say I'm a nida? I was just playing around. She's not believed the second time. She's tummy. But if she has an excuse, not I was just kidding around, then she'll be believed. For example, that the husband was coming on to his wife. But at that moment, in that home or in that chutzner, his sister was there, his mother was there, and she was not comfortable to be with him. And she tells him, I'm tummy. And then later she tells him, listen, really, I'm tohira. I only told you I'm tummy because your sister was there, your mother was there. I was concerned they might see us together. That's a proper amasla. Then she's the menace. Okay. Another din. Halacha yudalef. If a man is having a relation with a tohira, okay, ideally we're speaking about the Reforma people, a man is having a relation with his wife. And while they are together, mamish, she tells him nitmeisi. Upa, I got my period. So the din is that it's a shoygig, right? But for him to right away jump out of her is prohibited because he's having hana'ah. Now he knows that she's a nida. So la yifresh miyad v'hu b'kishuyay, because shahana aloi b'yitziyasei, just like kibiyasei and mamish. And if he, you think, oh my God, nida. The guy jumps out. He's chayv kares kimishabal nida. And any erva, if you discover you're doing tshuva and say enough, then you can't go. What should you do? You have to wait for the organ to become, for the member to become limp. And stop all movement. And the shoya the enim is daseya. And only then next, halacha yud beis. Now let's go back to vestas. For asulay la'adam sheyava yalishtei samach levesta. Samach levesta is like we mentioned. If a woman is getting a period on every chav dalid, right? Samach levesta will mean even if she gets it every 24th of the month at 10 a.m. From the beginning of that oinas yoim, even prior to 10 a.m., that's called samach levesta. And even after 10 a.m., that daytime period. Shema tiradam b'shas tashmish. Maybe the act of tashmish in itself will bring about a period, as it says, v'hizartem es b'nei Yisrael mitumasam. Warn them means they should take precautions to make sure that they don't violate this type of tumah. And v'kama, how much time may a couple not be together? Im hayadarka liris b'yoyim asal l'shamish from the beginning of the day. Im hayadarka liris b'layla asal l'shamish v'tichilas halayla. Halacha yud gimel. Over vesta v'loyro asa muteris l'shamish acha shetaber oynes havesas keitzad. Hayadarka liris b'sheishos b'yoyim. If a woman normally gets the period chayis midday, asur l'shamish v'tichilas hayoyim. Over sheishos b'yoyim v'loyro asa still not allowed to be together until night. And by the way, what do we do nowadays? In halacha side of not being together, precious, right? For the oina, she makes a bedika. And Rambam is not mentioning that over here. So it's the whole nighttime period. By the way, when it comes to the oinas, what counts is shkias achama and zrichas achama. That's how we count. The oinas hayem is from sunrise to sunset. The oinas halayla is from sunset to sunrise. Halacha yud dalet. Says the Rambam derech b'nei Yisrael b'nei Yisrael lo oilam livdoik atzman achar tashmish. That's the Rambam. Right? We call this, the Alter Rebbe calls this bedikas bal nefesh. The Rambam calls this derech b'nei Yisrael. Ekeitzad mikaneach hoish atzme b'matnas l'choinoloi. So there is a prepared cloth. Not just because, you have to clean yourself. It's a dafka, a cloth that's white, in which if some blood will be on the man, because he was with his wife, if, God forbid, b'shoigig, she got blood, then they'll discover it at least post facto. And also, umikanachas or isha atzma, b'maklis l'choinollah. No, guys, just remember, mikanachas is not bedika. Bedika is what we call the aid or the id, is something that is inserted inside the woman's body. Mekanachas means that you're wiping yourself clean after the act. And veroyin behem, but you look at this garment. Garment is prepared means you looked at it prior, you examined it prior to make sure there was no blood there, no redness there prior to using it. And after you use it, the goal is to check it to see there's no dam. Veroyin behem shemer asanam b'shas tashmish. He doesn't even have to check it. He has to just clean himself. She can check it because since the Torah gives her an amonos to check her own. Nemanas al shaloi halacha tezvav. Begodim elu shemikanchen bohem. For them to be valid, the valid act of examination, they have to be made dafka out of linen, and they have to be shchakim. They have to be worn out. That means they're soft now, and they have to be white. And they are called idim be'inyan zeh. V'habeged shemekaneach boy nikra eit shaloi, and the garment or the towel or the sheet shemekanachas boy is called eit shaloi. Halacha tezayim. Another thing. Now that's so halacha yudalev is after you're together, right? Guys, we don't practice this nowadays in many cases, especially there's so much spotting going on. If women would do this the whole time, they would never be allowed to be together. But people used to be a lot more regular. Spotting was something very rare. So that was the derech that Rambam was saying that everyone did. And now the Rambam is adding, even for the Rambam, tsunuos. Everyone should be at tsunua, but that's already not for all. If you have to opt into this more than to Yudalad is like according to on everyone. Halacha tezayin hatsunuyos einan l'shamshus achiv to atzman tchila kaidem atashmish. That prior to every bia, they would make a bedika, a proper bedika, not a mikaneach. The isha she'ema vesis. Now, if a woman does not have a vesis, that's already a whole different thing. Which is again, they're common today. Women don't have a vesis. Then asura l'shamish achatibdik. Here we paskin just to know that if a woman doesn't have a vesas kavua, which is rare, but always she has at least 10 days after the mikvah or 12 days after the mikvah. Then afterwards, sometimes she gets it on day 13, on day 14. Those first 10 days is called vesas kavua. That's the way we pass. But whenever there is a time in the month where could be she's getting her period, so a woman should make a bedika before tashmish. So really putting it all together, she needs 2 edim. One lifnei tashmish and one achar tashmish. Avol isha sheyesh lo veses. Eino tzricha eid. If she has a vessel, the Rambam says, Eino tzricha eid lifnei tashmish. Elo mishum tznius. Avol achar tashmish. Going back to Rambam wants to differentiate the severity of Tezayin versus Yudalid. That hakoil tzricham shnei edim. Echad lo ve'echad lo. And this din is a feeling no better, or if she's a menika, these are women that normally don't see dam, or she's a zakena, she's after menopause, or she's a katana. Loy teshamish elo b'shnei edim. Echad loy ve'echad lo. How and now we're going to go to dam sulim. Avol besula, if the blood is coming from the human, the yosheves al dam toyar eina tzricha edim sharei adam shoises mimenu. In other words, there's no purpose in making a badika when there's still dam sulam. Of course, you're going to find dam, but that dam is from the sulam. And we're going to learn. If you can just close the door and tell her to go outside, that would be very helpful. Hamishamish mitasei pa'amim rabbis. Says that Rambam einon tzrichen libdek shnei ha'edem shalahem al kol biyobiyah. You don't have to examine it. You have to do a kinuach. Elam kanech be'eit shaloi, fi be'eit shalo, acher kol biyobiyah. But you don't have to check it. You only do that kol halayla. And in the morning, you can check the edem. In other words, it's not like, oh, you made a kinuach. You want to check it, but you don't have to do it after every biyah. Nims adam al eit shaloi, al eit shalo. Then, going forward, hadei zu tamei. Shimsha, can we close the door? Tell her we have to close the door. Shimsha mitasa, v'kimcha atzma, and now v'avad ha'eid. That means now you cannot make the bedika. Because maybe there was dam. It's interesting, and it got lost. So on one hand, you don't have to check it after every biyah, but it has to be there. She put that aid under the pillow or tachas, and then you find blood on it. So there, whenever you can be toila by saying maybe the blood did not come from the woman, from the market, maybe it came from something else, maybe there was a wound, or bachlal. Even nowadays, especially then, there were some bed bugs. What the Chazal used normally as one example is a louse. There's lice in the plural, there's a louse in the singular. Maybe it came from a louse that got crushed. So if the stain is extended, then we say then it's from the kinuah. But if it's rounded, then where halacha says if it's not beyond the size, today we say of a dime, then we say she's tohira. Because she'ein ze el adam ma'achoyles, she'nergo tachasakan, halacha yutes, kincha atzma be'eda badu klom. And now that aid got smeared on her thigh, and tomorrow you find blood on her thigh, yarezu tameyon. We don't say that maybe the louse got killed, crushed when the aid touched her. We don't say that. What happens if you did not previously examine that aid? You don't know him, and now you find dam. So if the size of dam is bigger than, let's say, a dime, then we say it's an either. Because a louse doesn't have so much blood in it. But if the quantity is smaller than that, then we say tohira she'ena ela min hamachoyles. Okay, halacha chaf. Mishra asadam b'shas tashmish. Harezu muteres l'shamish k'shetitar pam shniya. It was a one-time happenstance. Ra'asadam b'pam shniya, and during the biyah there was dam. Still, twice is not enough. Mishameshes pam shlishis. But it ra'asadam kach b'shlishis. That means this woman is established as someone who sees blood when she's with that man. And whenever that happens, I mean, today you have to ask a Rav, then theoretically they have to get divorced. But if there's you can justify it, you can explain it away. That you know what, they were Masham Shamuch Levesta. Then you say, because they had the biyah, right, too near to the time of the period. Or if you know there's a wound, You can say the blood came from the womb. But if the color of the blood or the substance of the blood is different, and she knows what dam is dam from the womb and what dam is a dam from a wound, if she can differentiate, then you can't be toilet b'maka. Then the menes isha loimer maka yeshli b'toich hamaka. Shememena yoytz hadam yoytz. And when she makes that declaration, if she knows that to be true, then v'tiyam oteres l'mayla. Only during tashmish. If it's coming from a wound in the womb, but not from the womb itself, then she will.
Wait, so if it's a uterine blood that comes from a wound, then that does not render her a nida?
No, it doesn't, but it has to be from a wound. Today, Danny, no woman will know that, but today you have in the neighborhood the Gavaldika woman people go to, right? Mrs. Siegel, and she'll right away tell the woman where it's coming from. And then halachically, you rely on that. Halacha chaf aleph. Mishra asodam. I don't think that today she's going to examine whether there's a wound in the rechem, but it's very common that there are wounds on the koisle harechem, the vaginal canal, and yet you have to know how to determine it. But it's determined halachically. Halacha chaf aleph. Mishra asodam b'shas tashmish. Pam rishoina ushniya v'shlishis, and the ein sham davar litleis boy. So then hareis u'tzes garish. But just because, like we mentioned, she has to get divorced, because we can always say that, yeah, with that man, she always bleeds when there's tashmish. But maybe another man won't cause her to bleed. Ni says, with a man number two, but again, twice is not enough to make a chazakah. But they say Lishlishi and Rasodam Kach B'Shas Tashus from the Shenim Shlishis. Now Hadezut is Godesh Va'asura Linosei Achetavri Mechoylizeh. Final halacha chav beis. Keitzad Voidekes Atzma Leida, that she's healed from it. How do you know? She's not allowed to marry another. She's not allowed to marry another man. So says that Rambam like this. This is a common bedika that doctors do today. They call this a speculum. They have to. There's a tube. Now the key about the tube is that upia ratzuf l'toicha. It cannot be pointy because inserting this tube, right today, the medical instruments are gavaldik. That in itself can wound her, can make her bleed, and it's not even a blood that will make her tummy. Number, and then umachneses hashifayferes ad mukaim sheyichayl. You have to insert it until where you could, and then you put through this tube. Umachneses b'teich hashifayferes. They mamish do this today. Today it's like a long Q-tip. All of the gynecologists do it. That's what they did then. You put it through the tube, and you are now able to touch what we call the opening of the uterus, as we're going to learn soon. And you take that material out. Because there's no other, it did not come from the vaginal canal because you went beyond it. Then you know that the blood that she's seeing the whole time is only midoicha katsudadim. And therefore she's tahira. And now, I'm just curious, why doesn't she do this bedika even in the first marriage? Maybe she could. Maybe she did it. Even though we know that for the first, second, and third marriages, the dam was coming from the makar, but now we know she healed. That's the pshat. Come to the final Pedic. Pedic has 25 halachas. Now we're going to learn about the blood itself, the dam nida. We're going to learn about the chamisha damim tameim, right? The maris of the dam. We're going to learn about the din of a mapelas, God forbid, if that will make her into a nida. And we're going to learn finally about dam psulim. Okay, very important to point out, since we're learning about these dinim, tadas hamishpacha, we don't pass him like the Rambam in many cases. Halacha out. Va'isha mitama ba'oinus. First of all, when we say that if dam leaves the makar, she becomes tameya, it has nothing to do with whether it's part of the natural cycle or whether she knows that something that she did unusual brought it about. Like if a person exerts themselves a lot, they do exercise in an unusual way. it doesn't change the status of her becoming a nida. Right? And that is both if it's dam nida or dam ziva, as we mentioned. Bekitzer, again, nowadays we don't differentiate, but we didn't tie them. First 7 days, if there is dam during those 7 days, it's a nida. If there is dam during the subsequent 11 days, then 1 or 2 days, she only has to count 1 day. If she sees it 3 days or more, doesn't make a difference. Keep going. What would be called an oinus? So oinus means that there's some exterior reason why it provoked her of getting her the dam. Could be the din is, the bottom line is, what makes her a need is not what brought it about, but hoyel v'ra'asadam nikol makayim nitmeis. And this is unlike the din of a zav. I will learn later that there we do say that it will depend why a man had this zav, but here by a woman there's no difference. Halacha. Umetama bekolshu, another din. Doesn't matter the quantity. So when we learned in the previous chapter that when you find on a kinuach, or today we call this a kesem. Let's speak about a kesem today because we are out whatever we are machmer according to some Lubavitch Rabbanim by a kinuach. But if you find a kesem, here's where we say that if it's smaller than the dime, we're toila and amachoilas. But here we're not talking about this. Here we're speaking about that we know the dam came out of the makoy. Umetama b'cholshu. And Kolosh Chazal, afilu ra'aso dam, as the small size of a mustard seed, tibadam kachadol, harezu kemi shazov mimeno domim harbe, benegei adinei tula v'tara, or benegei adinei isura l'baylo. Halacha base. Kol hanoshim metamois bebeis achitzoin. When do they become tamei? If the blood is discovered in the outer chamber. Right, we're speaking about the outer chamber of the vagina. In other words, even if the blood did not leave her body, but what needed to happen to make her tummy? The blood was uprooted from the womb, even though it did not flow out. Since it emerged from the upper portion of the vaginal canal, and we're going to have to get familiar with these lashonos of Chazal. From now on, we'll use the words bein hashinayim. Now she's tameya. Even though, again, the blood is still in her body. As it says in Mitzvah, the Torah says, bi bisara. Means even if you only find it, bi bisara, right? Das balabatim, you don't call that a flow. It didn't flow out, doesn't matter. It flowed out of the makoy, which is the womb. Now, it's how far does this bein hashinayim area, which is the upper portion of the vaginal canal, extend? Ad mekoyim shiagia elav ha'ever b'shas gemar biyah. It's up until the place where the male organ reaches during relations. Now, bein hashinayim, that area itself is kilofnim. So if it goes lower than it, then she becomes tameya. If it's still in the bein hashinayim area, logically, even though it left a makor, she's not yet tameya. Okay, halacha gimel. Mashal chachamim be'isha. So we're going to have to speak about this explicitly once, and then you'll use a lashon nikiyah. So we're going to. The Chazal gave the following metaphor, and if there would be a picture, I know in the Gemara when we learned it, it becomes easier. But let's go learn it as the best we could. The uterus, where the fetus is formed, is called by Chazal the source, which is amazing because that's the source of all life. Chava, right? Aim kol chai. That's why it's called the makoy. Source. For who? Shadam, Nida, Zava, Yotzim. It is from here that when blood leaves, that blood that will make her Tmeya and Asura Labayla, it's from there. To the exclusion, as we learned in the previous chapter, that could be she has a wound near there, or theoretically a wound in there, but a wound, that doesn't make her Tmeya. Now, that's also called Cheder. It's also called a room. Makar, room, Lefishuhu, Lefnai, Lefnim. The entire uterine channel, that's the place, right, that that entrance will contract during pregnancy to make sure the baby stays inside the womb. That same place that also then opens up a lot during the birth, that is called the proisdor. The proisdor means an antechamber. So it fits. Preisdor, cheder, or preisdor, makoir. Koloimer shehu beis sha'ar lorachet. Halacha dal. Shas gemar biyom. What happens? Ho'ever nichnas ba'preisdor, but ve'enoi magia ad roishoy mibafnim, elorachik mimenu ma'at, lefio its boys. Lefio its boys, loshen ikia. Means every man is different, but it doesn't go all the way in the. It doesn't fully go through the entire preisdor. That's the way it works. Now, above it, that's the place. Sheyesh boy shnei beitzim shalisha. Really, it's on the sides. That's where the woman has what we call in English the ovaries, and v'hashvilim, and the ducts. Shabahem is b'shalashich v'zera shalom. That area is called in Chazal the aliyah, the loft. U'kumai nekev pasuach min aliyah legag hapreisdor, and there is a hole, and that's actually how it's amazing. It's like a miracle how the egg, whenever the woman has an egg, she ovulates normally once a month. It's going to travel. And it's going to go min aliyah to the garag hapreisdor. That hole is called a passageway, a lul. The ha'ever nichnes lifnim min halul. On that height, it doesn't go in there. It's going on that height. B'shas gemar biyom. Halacha 5. When we were learning the Gemara, where we were learning Rabbi Steinsaltz, so we had the art school, he had good pictures just to, if you see it, you understand exactly what the Rambam is saying. Halacha hey. It's b'diuk the way it is. Dam haba min hacheder, kulei tamei. Dam that comes from the cheder tamei. Aside of dam toyar that we spoke bekitzer, right? That your letters, we don't practice it nowadays. According to the Rambam, even if she didn't stop bleeding after birth, but after 7 days passed by a boy, she went to the mikvah. After 14 days passed, after a girl, she went to the mikvah at night of the 15th. And for the next 33 days, for the next 66 days, that's called dam toyer. Tihartu. Or another dam that's toyer is called dam koishi, which is the bleeding that occurs during and before and during childbirth, as we'll learn soon, right? Pedek Zayin. The dam ha'aliyah, dam that's coming from the aliyah area, toyer. Mamish. Like a dam makash of a ma'ayin or ba'kavod or ba'kliyah chayet, a woman has a liver, God forbid, bleeding, or this, doesn't make her tummy at all. The dam hanimsa ba'preisdor. Now comes the question. So I guess, im nimsa min halul v'lifnim, above the area of the lul. Guys, I know this is on the side, but we're speaking about the height. Then it's tummy. Not because dam of the preisdor makes her tummy, because the chazaka is that dam from there really came from the cheder, really came from the makar. On all levels, the Tumah Vatara means that if she goes into the Beis Hamikdash, then she violated the Tumah Shenichnas Hamikdash. You know, if Truma becomes Tameh, if Kachim becomes Tameh, if halachically it's called a doubt, even though you can't eat it, you can't burn it. But it's Vadai. No, it's even though you don't know it came, but it's in the praise that Vadai, halachically Vadai, and it's Tumah Vadois. And the Einoim Nim Shemem in Aliyah Yara Delach HaNekev. Why? Because here we follow the Reiv. And it establishes a vadai. Machlal and Torah, when you go follow the majority, it's not a doubt. Sheroiv hadamim hanamtsoim kan is from the cheder. Now, nim hadam ba preisdor chutz lanekev, a little bit lower than that area. Now tumasi is a suffix. Shema min hacheder ba. Oy, maybe minu aliyah shasas derech halul. Suffix doesn't mean you're scot-free. Suffix would mean, let's say, the dinim of Tumah V'Tara, that if this woman touches Truma or Kachin, then it's Suffix Tameya. Suffix Tameya means you can't eat it.
How does she know which of these two options it is? If it's for sure.
If you would know. So one example is the fact that the Rambam gave that this, what we call today the speculum, right? Halacha Chav Beis of the last chapter, it's shayach that you can know exactly where it's coming from, Danny. Because if this shifay fetus was inserted exactly in that area, today you put a Q-tip. There's special, there's kalim for this. You know, or you go today again. You go to Rebbetzin Seagull. She'll tell you exactly where it's coming from. When a gynecologist will make a bibika, he'll know exactly where the blood is coming from. It's ein sofra truma v'kachim. But it's a tamei misafik. By the way, when it comes to the dinim of asura l'bayla, make no difference. She'll be a woman that's Asur Labayla, Suffolk. Okay, moving on. Halacha Vav is going to speak about the topic that we call now maris. The word maris means the shade of the color. Zok the Rambam that in the rechem or in the cheder or in the makor, right, there's moisture. And when something is flowing out from it, we said dam makes your tummy. You have to know what dam is. Dam, you don't ask a scientist to tell you if that's dam. The Torah determines what dam is called dam, and it has everything to do with the shade, with the type of color that it has. So let's go. Only what the Torah calls dam. As it says, dam yezoiv. Therefore, im shasas min arechem, something that looks whitish, or mashke that's yore greenish, or afal pishes michasik, even though it has the same texture of blood. Let me just add, even if you're going to ask today a doctor, this is dam, I don't care. That's not the only place. But in the Torah, there are times that the mara means the look. Here, the shade, the color is tremendously significant. She'll be taught. Halacha Zayin. Chamisha damim tameim be'isha. All right, the Mishnah is even if it's red, not all reds make her tamei. Some of this Nesoida we lost, and some of it we have. So one of the trainings that people have to undergo if they're going to pass them dinim is to push it, sit on a beis din, and to many batei dinim are busy with these matters the whole day, and they get the exact shade. Less than that is tohoira. If there's more reddish tinge, tamei. But it used to be a lot more precise. David HaMelech was the greatest expert, right? This famous story: 1,000 women came to him one day, and he passed them their own Uterus l'baleim. Even though what they saw was what they called blood, didn't fit these 5. What are the 5 matters? And Vashar taught Ha'adaim, red. We're going to get the details about that. Shachar is black. Next is Kikeren Karkoim, bright saffron. Kememe Adama, muddy water. Keyain Mosuf, diluted wine. In the times of Chazal, wine was not consumed in its natural state. It needed to be diluted, and obviously the color would change depending on how much water you added. And the Rambam is going to go through each one of these 5. For Adam Ketzer, Enoi, Ka'amud, Shiyotza, Rishon, Midam, HaKazan, Shalbaniyot. That's the Rambam's way of defining red. That when a person bloodlets, which was common in those days, so the first flow, that red is the red that we're talking about. Noise Hadam Bakois. So what do? So a woman has a mara. So there's dam, we learned in the last chapter, right? There's a matli, there's a matlis, there's an aid. Take that. Get someone to bloodlet, put that person's blood in a cup. Umakevloi. Hakafa means you're putting 2 things together. And you're comparing. Veroya. Gavaldik. No one does that nowadays because we are much more machmir because we lost some of the Messiah. But here we're speaking about it. If it's red, but it's not exactly this, she'll be tahira. How do you know that? By comparing. Next, black. Black means ke'ein hadyoy hayavish. Dried ink. That's easy. Nothing to explain. Halach. Next, the third one is kekerem karkoim, bright saffron. Ketzad. What do? You push it again. You make hakaf. Yovi karkom lach. You bring fresh saffron, which is still bigush adama sha'ala, which is still the cloud of earth is still connected to it. And you take from one of the better stalks, which is the middle stalk. The middle stalk is entirely a stem. And in this middle stalk, there's going to be 3 stalks coming out. So you want to get that one. Umakiv hadam la Allah emsoy, and you bring the stain that this woman has right next to the middle leaf in the middle stalk. Compare them. What's the other mara? Kimeme adama, muddy water. I'm sorry. What does muddy water mean? So first of all, I'm a Brazilian. I know what the red earth means. Red earth. I was going to say Yovi adama because sichnei. You bring earth, and Rambam uses what was common then to him and to the people that were learning around them to the valley of Sichnei. The Chayotzeba. What's unique over there? Shehi Aduma, mamish red earth. Red earth is gavaldik. They told me that black earth is even better, but red earth is a good simon. It has a lot of koyach in it. The noisin allow mayim b'kli. You put water in a cup. Ad sheyala hamayim al ha'of. If you have earth and you put water, you want for the water to go a little bit above the earth. How much? Keklipas hashoyim. A mashal. The thickness of the klipa of a garlic. And the ain shir leila mayim leila afar. The point is, no matter how little or how much afar, add water, it should only go a bit above it. Then you have to mix them together. You stir it. And while it's muddy, not, when you stir this, when you make mud, after a couple of minutes, the earth is going to settle down. But you want it to be mixed. When it's mixed, and if it starts already to clear up, you have to mix it again, and you mark it. You bring that mada, you bring the kinuach, you bring the matlis, you bring the aid, and you compare it.
Isn't there 100 different colors?
No, there's not. No, so no, it's one. No. It's one. You have to have the earth of sichli. And you're right. It became difficult to follow all of this. Today we don't go into these details. Today red is red. Okay, even if it's not red, if it looks like red, a little bit of red, but even there you have to get shimush for that. Halacha test. Arba maras ha'elu im hoye mara hadam kemara kol echad mehem oy amoik mehem. Here we go. Deeper. You have to push it. You have to be trained to know what deeper means. It's a deeper, which from all of the above, right? He's speaking about the four. He's not speaking about black. Black is black. But the other four, hareis atomic. But if it's lighter than the four, it's like a red, but it's lighter. Hareis atohar. Keitzad. Hoya hadam. Shachar yoisin min ad yoy. Oh no, we're speaking about black also. If it's blacker than the ink, kameya. If it's not as black, kegoin. Shoya mareo ke'en asayis hashachar. It looks like a black olive. Or ke'en hazefes. Tars, ganz black. Or ke'en ha'oidet. It's like a raven. Hareis atohar. T'chein b'sha'ar. So 1 second, we spoke about wine. Wine we're coming to in a moment. That's the four until now, including black. Now he's going into the wine. So first of all, when we're speaking about diluted wine, so how do you dilute it? We had in the Gemara people that would put 3 portions water, remember that, to 1 portion wine, 2 portions. So the Rambam says, chelik echad yain, but from which wine? From wine that comes from the Sharon area of the Holy Land. So you want to have 1 portion natural, raw, the chadash, and then 2 mayim. In other words, 33% versus 66%. That's the ratio needed to get to this color. The Rambam didn't put all 5 together because here it has to be exactly that. If it's even deeper, or avada, if it's lighter, toh. Now the Rambam has a gewaldige chiddush, something that can happen nowadays. A woman had a doubt, she had a shaila, and she lost the bedika, she lost the cloth. And now we're going into these pratim. We're saying that you have to be makif. It says that Rambam v'nemenes isha loimer k'mara zero isi v'yibadet. And based on her, this is the color that I have. Now it's common even in Bati Dinim today that Dayanim are going to say, a woman is going to come with an aid. They'll keep it. They'll keep it to train people. So a Beis can have a few hundred aidim. They don't keep more because the 2 that are alike you don't have to keep. So it wasn't like this. She says it was like that. Based on her memory. Now, Yud Aleph, when we're speaking about makif, makif means you're putting 2 things together. Kate and makif, we have this lotion by taking truma. Minamukov, right? You have 2 piles, you can take, let's say it's echad mechamishim, right? You can take 4% if it's from the same quality, the same level of chiyuv, mukov, it has to be tzuzam. Ketzad makaveroya, lokeach hamatlis. You take the garment, sheyesh bayadam biyodoi, umabit boy ubadiyoy, and you have the dried ink. So you're putting them, you're looking. Oy, bo'ela, in that middle leaf from the middle stem of the karkai, or in that blood of our cousin that's in a cup in front of you, or in that water that you made muddied. You compare it based on your perception. Some people are colorblind, some people have more chush, less chush. But you can't look at the wine or at the Adam HaKazan or the wine through the cup from the outside, even if you have see-through glass. You have to look directly because it's that sensitive. Especially when it comes to the yain. We said about a yain, even Amak is also not going to make her Tameya. Oh, here, another detail, the cup has to be wide. Mishkali mana, that's machzik shnei loigen. Why do we need to have a cup that's relatively wide? In other words, if the top of the cup is very narrow, because there's going to be a certain shadow from the walls. And again, it's that precise. We don't do this nowadays. We lost some of this Messiah.
What is Almond?
Deeper. You have to see. You have to be trained for this. Everyone understands. Deeper doesn't mean red. It means deeper. Okay, like that. Halacha Yud Beis. Ein boit ken adam ella al gaba matlis levana. Now the dam has to be on a white cloth, and what light is good? Only sunlight. By the way, nowadays also, even people that are into maras, right? Of course, you get good at it. Some maras are so vade to meir or so vade to hoira, the Rav can look at it in a fluorescent light at night. Doesn't matter. But whenever there's a shaila, and a Rav knows what is in that, I don't know. Sometimes it will make all the difference in the world as to the source of light. The source of light has to be sun, but in the shade of the sun, as they'll say. No, you look in the sun, but you make with your hand, you create a shade.
You have to be outside?
You don't have to be outside. You can be inside as long as you're getting sunlight. First days. Or that's only if it's a shayla. Many Rabbanim that are experts at this don't need that precision because they see this is avada good or that's avada bad. But even then, every now and then, they'll say, oh, wait until tomorrow because now I can't look at it. First days. You make a shadow with your hand over the blood. And but the color of the matlas, the blood stain is in the shade. It doesn't have to be your hand. It can be a branch of a tree. That's when you get the exact color. That's why when people wanted to make apps today, to send a shaila, they take a picture, not shaykh. Because the color is not exactly the same. Very good. The Rambam saying you don't need all of these conditions. You get better at it. You become more expert. Right away, it's only the imnistapik loy b'maris min amarois, and now he has to make the hakafa. So now you got to do it the way we said above. Moving on to the new topic. So first of all, we mentioned that dam from the cheder, dam from the makar, that dam is matama the woman. And even if the dam is found, as we mentioned, very close to the rechem, chazaka came from the rechem. What happens if a woman had a miscarriage? So says that Rambam alach yud gimel mampelas chaticha. We're speaking about a piece of flesh. We're not speaking about a formed child. Even though the flesh is red, im yesh dam, and the dam is also on the outer part of this chaticha, then she's tameya. Ve'im lafta hoira. Even if you open up that flesh and there's dam, the layer dam, she's tahoira. How amazing is that? First of all, the Rambam doesn't paskin that every time the market opens up, like we paskin aim psichos arechem b'li dam. The Rambam doesn't hold by that. No, just because the chaticha came out of the marker, so there was an opening of the marker, it doesn't mean there was dam. The dam has to be bipsara. Bipsara means the dam has to be coming out of her body, not dam in a chaticha that came out of her body. Oh, she'ein zeh dam nida el dam chaticha. Halacha yudalot. Hipila chaticha keruya. But if that chaticha was already ripped, was sliced open, the dam ogre b'teicha, now she's tameya. You understand? Because we say that the dam that was inside the chaticha went through the stock and it touched her psara. So it was.
It must have the right color.
Yeah, for sure. It was. We already established the color. It's dam.
In the chaticha.
Yes. He pilakim in klipa. If God forbid, what you can say, what came out of her body looks like a shell, or like a hair, or like afar. Kimin yachmushin. So if that itself had the red that we just learned, then put it lamayim. Guys, dam makes her tummy. Basar does not make her tummy. So what is it? Now it's red, but is it basar or is it congealed dam? That's the subject. So you make the examination of putting it into lukewarm waters. You leave it in there. If it dissolves, is a raya that it was blood. Blood dissolves. Basar does not dissolve. There's good to me. Just because it became congealed, she's still tummy. But if you let it in this lukewarm warm water, but you have to leave it for 24 hours, exactly 24 hours, and then it dissolved, suffix tameo. If it's more than 24 hours, then for sure, okay, halacha tezvav. We say that whatever came out is a makkah, but it's not the dam that makes her tummy. Hipila kimin chagavim. If what looks, she has a discharge that looks like a locust, kimin dagim, looks like a fish, shkatzim, uramasim, always im yesh imahem dam temeya and im lav tohira. Halacha tezayin. That's for Danny, they made the shifay fetus that we learned at the end of last chapter. And and there's blood in it. So blood left the makar, meha makar, but it went straight in this shifay fetus. And now the dam is out of her body, still tohira. Because it says, dam hiyazoiv bibisara. Achetira bibisara kederach shanasum royoiv. The aid that Achaisha leader is b'shifay fetus. Lachayudzayin. But Isha she ishtina mine. The woman urinates the yotza dam in meiraglaim, and she finds blood in the urine. The Rambam says, "Bein shishtina v'yoymedes, bein shishtina v'yoysheves." In all cases, she's tohira. And even if she had hergish, vafilu hirgish gufa v'nizdaza, normally the sensation she has when dam is leaving her makar. If the dam was found only in the urine, eino chasheshes, because we say that hergish was meiraglaim. She'ei meiraglaim and acheder. And therefore, we say that Rambam is a doctor. The dam is a urine tract infection or any other reason. The dam zed damakuhu b'chaloy cheles. It's either a colon wound or it's a kidney wound. And today again, if a woman has dam in her urine, she should go right away.
The colon. Thank you. She should go to a gynecologist, and he'll determine where the dam came from. Halacha yudches. Now we're going to learn about dam psulim, and that's going to be the final topic of this chapter. Dam psulim. Toiru. Just to say, today we don't paskin that way. We paskin that dam psulim is matama midrabanan. The only difference for us, for Ashkenazim, that we do 5 days and 7 days. So by dam psulim, we only do 4 days. But the Rambam paskins, dam psulim, that's the iked, then is completely toiru. We have all these sugis in the Gemara. And the eno loy dam nida, loy dam ziva. A fact, right? That's a fact. She'eno min hamaked, elo loy dam chabura. There's a wound. Whether we consider it extracted from, right? Whatever the beginning of Ksubas, that's on the Hilchah Shabbos, not the Gefer here. The Kates are din psula b'dama. So what's the din? Oh, it's a man is having a relation with the psula. Today it's very difficult because today we machmer dam psulam on the tamar. Then it was much easier. Dam psulam doesn't make her tummy. So here we go. This is katanom. And that's important because the vesis normally comes when she becomes a naro. Now, some women are different. So first of all, she's a katana. Number 2, bein loida asodam miomel, whether she taka normally never had the normal vesis. Bein lo asodam be'savia. Regardless, harezu muteres labayla at shetich yamakia. Until we halachically determine that the bleeding of the hymenal bleeding heal no more dam psulim, as the Rambam will explain how we determine that halachically. Every time they have a relation, there's dam psulim. Chol dam shetira mach basamaku. But even if she's a minor, once we establish that the psulim completely healed, then she becomes an it. Halacha yutes. Nises kishehi nara, which is the normal zman for a woman to get her monthly veses. Here it depends. If she never saw dam, then she's muteres labayla arba yomim bayom balayla. More to be defined. We say it's dam psulim. We say it's a lot of blood. Okay, she had a lot of dam psulim. As long as we did not establish that the wound healed. But if she began to get her veses before she got married, now it's harder to say that the dam is dam psulim. Maybe it's a dam veses. So here we say, Ein loy lava Allah ela be'ilah rishayno peish. During the be'ilah rishayno, dam psulim, then okay, that's a dam psulim. Afterwards, you can no longer hang it on the dam psulim. And furthermore, we considered after the Be'ilah, which normally we learned, 2 chapters ago, that if a man during the Tashmish, he says to Meyani, all of the dinim, that he has to be noitz, raglav, it's a part of Barkarka, and if he's a yoitza, it's chayv kares. Not here, not even nowadays. What's during the Be'ilas mitzvah, even if dam is choices, that's dam psula. But after he's poidish from her, then ki'ilahu dam nida. By geres. Now all of this is by anaro. So we have a Tana, we have another now. We got geres. Can be because begeres can be theoretically 12 and a half. Then we have this in between. Nois law called halayla bishay. Even many be'ilas, but only for the first night. You got it.
More lenient.
Much more lenient. No, because she never had dam yomel. Forget. No, it makes a lot. It's very easy to chap notes. If she already previously got once her period, then it's harder to say the dam is dam psulim. Even though she's a begeres, but she never saw dam yomel, then at least you give her one night. Allah chachav. Arba leilos that we spoke before in the case where they have 4 nights in the halacha yutes. Nara, and that never got a period, right? The begeres only has 1 night. The nara has 4. What does it mean? 4. He said 4 night and day. It doesn't have to be consecutive days. It means the first 4 be'ilas. That's what it means. Boyalayla, and even if you waited shnei chadashim or shleisha, the next time is called number 2. As long as halachically we did not say that the wound healed. The Rambam is going to explain exactly what that means. Halacha chav aleph. You have to halk up many details. Chen ketana, that we say much more than 4. Even if we did not determine this for a full year. And if there's dam, that's dam sulam. Halacha chabes. Ketana sheni says, and now the nas is not a tachas bailo, but taday and adam shoyis machmas amakom. Kol be'ilah shubal kshiktana are considered like 1 night. Now that she becomes a nara, you go into the din of 4. Whatever happened until nara is 1, and now you have another 3. Mashlim ilay arba yomim b'mei naras. Furthermore, now we have 3 more times, 3 days. They are besirugin. They are not one after the other. For example, you may naros is 6 months. You have 3. She's giving an example of 2 months. 2, 2, 2, 3. All of this is muter as long again. Okay, how do you know halachically whether the wound healed? Halacha chav gimel. If whenever she stands up, she sees some blood, but when she's sitting down, she doesn't see. But when she sits on the ground, tira. But if she sits on karam uksasais, if it's more comfortable like tira, that's a raya that lechoisa maka. That means that pasak adam l'rasa klal. But if standing and sitting on the ground on cushions won't make a difference. That means choisa maka. Of course, if b'chlal, there's always a little bit of blood. Elatira adam, even when she's sitting al karam uksasais, then we say, no, it's not dam sulam. Dam sulam won't come from sitting on a cushion. Then we say adarabba, even though she never got a period, that's the period blood. Halacha chav daled, hoya roya be'es tashmish. Then we say machmas mako. Shimsham itasa v'loira asodam even 1 time, and we'll know that because the Rambam paskins, right? Remember that not the tznuos, but in Perek 4th chapter halacha yudaled. The Rambam says, "Derech b'nei Yisrael la'olam yivdek atzmon achar tashmish." So you had a bila, you made the kinuach. There was no dam. That's it. V'achar kach ra'as dam shalei machmas tashmish. Then areiz dam nido halacha chafei haboyel psula and b'chlal v'lo yotze mimeno dam. The first time v'chazar ba'ala v'yotze dam. The Rambam says afilu ha'isakatana. The second time hareiz dam nido. Because she'ilu ha'yadam sulam ha'yaba batchila. We say this has a halach of dam sulim, even though it's not called a bia. But it's dam sulim. The chiddush is that we began saying
it goes back.
Yeah. But the point is, it's more than that. Is that we paskin midai raisa. A woman can become a nida on the day she was born, right? And she can become a zava on the 10th day of her birth, if that were to happen. But since we say it's Dam Sulim, therefore she's not Tamei Gavaldik. To be continued.
Shkoyach.
Right, better than yesterday. Oh, yesterday was amazing. Yeah, we're not done yet with many dinim that I'm going to get lamais.